I'll make it clear from the beginning, honestly, that I have never seen a black caribou in the wild, a woodland caribou or a mountain caribou. So we'll get that out. I do not talk from any kind of experience about having seen them. I came to this place in 1974 and very shortly thereafter I became interested in a herd of mountain caribou that then existed in the area of Priest Lake. I call them black caribou. Some people call them woodland or mountain caribou. There's a taxonomic dispute about that, but I prefer black caribou. In 1980, in the early part of the 1980s, I was peripherally involved with the listing of these species on the endangered species list. Actually, as far as I know, they were not listed as endangered. They were only listed as threatened. I could be wrong about that, and it's been 40-something years. And a guy by the name of Jasper Carlton was the central character in this protection of this southern herd of caribou in the lower 48, which happened to be the last herd of caribou in the lower 48 at that time. There were no more caribou in Maine or Minnesota or Michigan or anywhere else. They'd all been extirpated. And the only herd of caribou in Idaho, or in the lower 48, was in the Selkirk Mountains of northern Idaho. But there's a political dispute about that, which we don't need to get into at the moment, I guess, although it's a sore spot with me. In any event, Jasper Carlton was living in Bonner's Ferry, and I sent him a letter. And I said, Jasper, I would like to help you with the recovery and the listing of the mountain caribou as under the Endangered Species Act as a protected species. And he wrote me back a very generous and cordial letter, and I have those in the box, I think. And I invited him for dinner to this cabin where we're photographing this interview. And this was 1982 or 3. And Jasper drove down from Bonner's Ferry. I think he may have spent the night. And we served him dinner, and we talked about the caribou endlessly all night. I recall it was fascinating. And I want to say here and now that Jasper Carlton was the primary moral driver behind the protections, whatever the protection the mountain caribou got. It was Jasper Carlton who really was the force behind trying to protect this species. I was just happened to be obsessed with the animal's presence in the Selkirks. And the reason I was obsessed, I think, was because there's such an emblematic or such a symbolic measure of the wildness of an area. And I like wildness. I don't like tame environments. I like wild environments. That's just by nature, I think. Jasper and I decided that we needed to try to get the caribou listed. And my twin brother and his wife happened to be, they had gone to Princeton and graduated from Princeton, and they had a friend at Princeton whose name was Amos Eno, E-N-O. And Amos was a wonderful guy, and he was an ardent conservationist, and he worked in Washington, D.C., and he worked for an outfit called the Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which was no relation or affiliation at all with the Fish and Wildlife Service. It was a private foundation looking out for species in America that needed protection. And I called him because I knew him from through my twin brother and my sister-in-law. And Amos came out, and he said, "Tell me about the mountain caribou, black caribou of the Selkirk Mountains." And in northern Idaho. And I told him about it, and I shared a lot of information with him, and I think that eventually I put him in touch with Jasper Carlton, who I said was the moral force behind the caribou, the conservation of the caribou in Idaho. And Amos and Jasper went to work on documenting both the rarity of these animals and the need for them to be governmentally protected in Washington, D.C. under the Endangered Species Act. And I remember that Jasper had a very difficult time convincing government officials, mostly officials from the state of Idaho, who are still as remorseless as they can be about protecting endangered species, because they do not want any management constraints on their timber cutting practices. And the reason is because Big Timber in Idaho owns and controls the Idaho Department of Lands, the Idaho Land Board, and the Idaho Department of Fish and Game. There's my political statement for the night. But that's the way it was. And Jasper needed them on the endangered species list, but the U.S. Forest Service was not much better. They would deny the existence, and in fact, the mountain caribou were declared extinct twice in northern Idaho and in America before Jasper Carlton spent the winter in Blue Joe Creek or Cow Creek or somewhere up in the northern parts of Boundary County. It would have been the Priest Lake drainage, I think, in a tiny little trailer. I spent the winter up there and documented that they exist and filmed them. But anyway, Jasper Carlton and Amos Eno eventually hooked up, and Amos Eno went to Capitol Hill one day or 1 week and started to push for the listing of the mountain caribou as being a protected species under the Endangered Species Act. And I'll never forget, after a couple of 3, 4, 5, 6 months, Amos called me and said, "Your critter is listed." That was his words. I remember the exact quote, "Your critter is listed." And I called Jasper and I told him, "We're done. We got him listed." And I think it was a threatened status at the time, not an endangered status. And subsequently, of course, the Idaho Department of Lands and the Idaho Land Board and Idaho Fish and Game completely and willfully and negligently botched it. And they are no more. This is the year 2020. This is July. But there are no more caribou in the lower 48. Can we stop here and take a break?
You want to take a break?
Yes, please.